This is Dr. Kraus, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the third of the Festal scrolls in the order they occur in the Old Testament, and this is the book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes has been a favorite target book for critics of the Bible for really a long time, and let me just give you three groups that use this book. Atheists target the book because it seems to contain passages that deny there is life after death, and I don't think that's a correct reading of the book of Ecclesiastes. That's taking texts out of context, but atheists have used the book against the Bible. Hedonists, or people that just want to enjoy life without any morality, hedonists use the book because the book seems to open the door to an eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die sort of philosophy of life. And again, I think that's a misreading of the book, but some hedonists will take it that way. And then skeptics sometimes use the book because the book comes across with a cynical, doubting tone from the very beginning, and that's true. So skeptics think, well, this guy was like me, he's a skeptic. But I think at the end, we find a very strong statement of obedience to God, which just takes away that argument. So all of this misses the main purpose of the book. The main purpose of the book is to examine secular wisdom and knowledge. And the key phrase, to understand this book, you've got to notice this phrase. The key phrase in the book is under the sun. He talks about things being under the sun. You see this like in chapter 1, verse 3. Let me read. What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? This isn't just talking about being out in the open on a hot day, but it's an examination of human thinking and activity apart from God. So let me remind you again of our little chart of the cosmology of the people of the Bible, how they would have understood their world. And you can see the diagram here. You've got the earth being surrounded by this chaotic outer sea and covered by a canopy or a firmament, it's called in some translations of the book of Genesis, this canopy that covers the earth. And it's on this canopy that the sun and the moon travel every day. So they don't have any idea of the rotating earth around the sun or any of those sorts of things. For them, the sun travels across the canopy, and above the canopy is where heaven is. So this is just key. When he talks about under the sun, he means under heaven, not in heaven. He's not talking about the reality of things that might be in heaven, but those things under the sun, the realm of humankind. So just keep that in mind as we look at the book, as you read it, those references to under the sun. So a couple of things to look at. Who wrote this book? Who is the author? The author is not really named, but we are given some very big clues. He identifies himself in the first verse as Koheleth. The Hebrew word is Koheleth, which is translated various ways. The teacher, or the old King James translated it the preacher. The word means in Hebrew something like public speaker or maybe leader of the assembly. And this is the meaning of the Greek name of the book, Ecclesiastes, meaning the leader of the assembly. This is where we get our term Ecclesiastes from, the leader of the assembly. One author has suggested that in the context of the book, this might more accurately be seen as the searcher, one who is searching. Okay, I make a comment there. I think that's kind of reading the meaning of the book into this word, but Ecclesiastes is a lot better at asking questions than it is at giving answers. I will admit that. It asks all the questions, doesn't always give us all the answers we would like. The author of the book also identifies himself as the son of David, meaning he is the king. This may mean that David is his literal father, or it might mean that David is his ancestor. Remember that Jesus was called the son of David. He also identifies himself as king in Jerusalem, And we read in the book in verse 16 of chapter 1 that he is very wise, in fact, known for his wisdom. We read in chapter 2 that he's a great builder, that he is also very wealthy, and that he has many concubines, meaning a large harem. Remember, we said concubines are like secondary wives. So of the information we have in the Bible, this only matches one person, and that would be Solomon, King Solomon, the son of David. He was David's direct son. He reigned in Jerusalem as king for 40 years. He was the wisest man of his time. He was a great builder, including the builder of the temple, of a marvelous palace called the Palace of the Forest of Lebanon, and of a throne room building, the Hall of Justice. And he was incredibly rich. His tribute money alone, we're told, at the height of his reign was 666 talents of gold per year from the other nations that he dominated. So that would be about, in today's terminology, about $250 million worth of gold every year. And that doesn't count the other income that he might have raised through taxes. Through taxes. And harem, concubines, oh yes, he had a lot of wives. First Kings tells us he had about 1,000 wives. And so I really think whether he wrote the book exactly or not, we're intended to see this as coming from him. So it might be some of the wisdom and writings of Solomon that somebody writes up and puts into a book a little bit later. I'm okay with that. But I do think we're intended to see the primary author or source of this material as Solomon. So the bottom line of the book is when old King Solomon writes Ecclesiastes at the end of his life, he is truly able to say, hey, been there, done that, seen that, oh, I tried that, I thought that thought, I heard that, and I investigated that. Ecclesiastes 2:10, he says, I denied myself nothing. And his conclusion is that everything is futile, everything is vanity, chasing after the wind. So Ecclesiastes then is the wise man at the end of his life, exploring all of the great questions of life. He will not put up with simplistic answers, and just honestly, he's a little bit jaded. He's not easily impressed by the things that we might be impressed by when we're young. The bottom line of this comes at the end of the book in chapter 12, verse 13. Now, all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. So two things here that he concludes. Number one, fear God. In modern terms, does that just mean like if we were to meet up with God, we'd be afraid? I think it means more than that. I think I might put it this way in modern terms, that we should realize we are accountable to God. We should be afraid of not paying attention to God. So fearing God, being accountable to God. And number two, going right with it, keeping God's commandments. Without fear of God, there is no obedience. There is no accountability. I'm not accountable to those people I do not have some respect or even fear of. So some think this is kind of a sub-Christian ethic. What's our duty? Just obey, just keep commandments. Yet in Jesus we don't have freedom to sin. We talk about grace a lot, but Jesus doesn't give us freedom to sin. We have forgiveness. Jesus does not remove our fear of God. He gives us confidence before the throne of Almighty God, of the El Shaddai of all the universe. And so I just think that this book is full of very important lessons for us. Let me just point out a few texts here. Very famous text, chapter 3. Let's read a little bit here. Chapter 3, beginning with verse 1. There's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. Same way of saying under the sun, in the realm of human beings. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate. And then this final one, a time for war and a time for peace. So you get here in chapter 3 this sort of very poetic and beautiful estimation of that everything in our lives has a proper time and place, and that God is in control of these things. But read on a little bit, verse 9. What do workers gain from their toil? I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. That's pretty strong language. God has not necessarily given us easy lives. This is really a reflection on the curse that is given to Adam as he's expelled from the garden, that you will earn your living by hard work. Life is going to be hard. He has made everything beautiful in its time. So in the midst of this hardness of life, there is always beauty. And then this great phrase, He has also set eternity in the human heart. Eternity in the heart. We are made with a longing for the presence of God. We are created to be aware that there is a future, there is an eternity. We can understand that. We don't just live in the moment, we live for the future. An eternity in the human heart, reading on, no one can fathom what God has done from the beginning to the end. I know that there is nothing better than for people to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it and nothing taken away from it. God does it so that people will fear Him. There's just a lot there. I don't have time to unpack that very well, but boy, you could preach on this, and just even if you're scratching the surface, you would have a very rich message about the plan of God for our lives and our relationship with Him. And God wants us to enjoy life, but part of the enjoyment of life is work. It's not always going to be easy, and there's a certain enjoyment even in the toil. This is kind of the conclusion of Solomon at the end of his life. Let me look at one other verse here with you at the beginning of chapter 12, the last chapter of the book. He says, remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come and the years approach, when you will say, I find no pleasure in them. And then he goes on in verse 2 and following to describe what it's like to be old. The sun and the light and the moon and the stars grow dark and clouds return after the rain. He's talking about lack of sight. Our eyes fade, our eyesight fades, and a lot of poetic language here. Again, don't have time to unpack this, but worth your study. There are a lot of commentaries and books that will explain this. So what's he trying to say? What's the lesson here in verse 1 of chapter 12? Remember your Creator in the days of your youth. The Barna organization kind of shook everyone's world back in the 1990s in the Christian world by saying that a vast majority of faith decisions are made by the time we are age 18. People don't change their view of God after age 18 very much. The people who come to faith in their 50s or 60s are the rare ones, not the normal ones. And so this is a warning to us that we need to guard our hearts when we are young. We need to develop our relationship with the Lord when we are young. Remember your Creator when you are young. Have that strong relationship to carry you throughout your life. But also it's a caution, I think, for parents. It is very important that we raise children who have a relationship with the Lord when they are young. Now, if they choose to reject that later, there's not too much we can do about that. But the wisdom of this verse holds true, that even if I am introduced to the Lord and to my relationship with Him, even if I grow older and drift away from that, the chance that I will come back is very, very strong. So a great verse. So let me just give you the object lesson for Ecclesiastes. It's a little makeup powder thing that women have in their purses called a compact. Uh, Maybe some of you guys have compacts too, I don't know. But when pushed to an extreme, the makeup process can progress into the feeling of vanity. I think it's okay to wear makeup and to look good and everything, but some people are consumed by their appearance and spend way too much time on it, and that goes into what we would call vanity. I am vain. And the theme word then for Ecclesiastes is this word, vanity. Ecclesiastes 2:17, a key verse. After he goes through this list of all the things that he's done, he says, "So I hated life, because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind." The old translation, all of it is vanity, meaningless, empty. There are so many things that we do in life that when we look back on them, why did I waste my time on that? Why was I consumed for years with stuff like fantasy football or whatever? I'm picking on some people here, but it's a waste of my time. I've got better things to do. I've got greater thoughts to think. I've got greater relationships to build than some of these useless things that we do. And we all get caught in that trap. But Ecclesiastes is a great warning against that, that if we're not careful, our life will just be meaningless and it will be vanity, and we will not be happy.